The function of your respiratory system is to provide a steady flow of oxygen into your body and a steady flow of carbon dioxide out. The work of the respiratory system is done by your lungs and diaphragm, assisted by rib muscles. First, clusters of cells in your brainstem send nerve impulses to muscles attached to your ribs and to your diaphragm. In response, the rib muscles contract, lifting your ribs up and out. Your diaphragm contracts and flattens. These movements increase the volume of your chest and stretch your lungs. That causes the air pressure in your lungs to drop below the pressure of the air around you. So air loaded with oxygen flows into your respiratory system. You have inhaled. Now other nerve cells in the brain send impulses that cause the diaphragm and rib muscles to relax. Your elastic lungs recoil a little, and some of the air they contain, now loaded with carbon dioxide, is pushed back out from your respiratory system. You have exhaled. When you exhale, you often use your vocal cords to make sounds. The flaps that stretch across your windpipe are your vocal cords. Air moving past them can make your vocal cords vibrate, producing sound. You can tighten or relax the muscles that support your vocal cords. This changes the pitch of the sound, but the ability to speak depends on the ability to breathe. These students are learning cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, an emergency technique to help people whose breathing has stopped. Failure of the respiratory system may happen for reasons as varied as drowning or cardiac arrest. Using dummies specially constructed for the purpose, a student can learn ways to restore a victim's breathing in a short time and sometimes save that person's life.
One of the first things we need to do is make sure the person receives oxygen, and we do this through mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. We take one hand and put it on the forehead and the other hand underneath the chin, and we go ahead and tilt the head back. At this time, we're going to check to find out if she's breathing on her own through the look, feel, and listen. Determining if she is not breathing on her own, we start by giving 2 breaths of air through mouth to mouth. We check for the pulse for 5 to 10 seconds. We feel a pulse. We send somebody to the phone to call 911, and at this time we go ahead and start with mouth-to-mouth breathing, 1 breath every 5 seconds. And we continue that until the time help arrives and takes over for us.
You inhale in order to bring oxygen into your body. First, your respiratory system prepares and adjusts the air. Inner tissues in your nose and mouth moisten the air. Warm blood that flows through the capillaries lining these surfaces heats the air. And it is cleaned by sticky mucus covering these surfaces that traps some of the tiny particles suspended in the air. Other particles drop out as the air rushes through the nose and pharynx. From here, air moves downward, carrying its load of oxygen. The passage at the back of your nose and mouth divides into 2 tubes. One, the esophagus, is part of your digestive system. It leads to your stomach. But air flows instead down the trachea, the part of your respiratory system that is sometimes called the windpipe. Air enters the trachea past a muscular flap called the epiglottis. As long as you're breathing, this flap stays open. But if you start to swallow, it automatically closes and covers the end of the trachea. This usually prevents anything except air from entering the trachea and passing to your lungs. What can you do if a foreign object does enter the respiratory system?
In order to establish an airway with a person with an obstruction, we must identify first the fact that they do have an obstruction, and we ask them the magic question, can you speak or can you cough? When they indicate that they cannot, you must go ahead and make a fist. You step around behind them, and you come on right next to the belly button, just above the belly button, grab the other fist with the other hand, and you pull inward and upward, and you repeat this sequence over and over and over until either the obstruction comes out, or number 2, the paramedics arrive on the scene, or number 3, the person becomes unconscious. If for some reason you should find yourself in an obstructed airway, you'll be unable to summon help because you cannot speak and you cannot cough. You'll need to get a hold of a chair or the corner of a table and line that up with your stomach and fall on it, causing the obstruction to relieve itself from your airway.
During normal breathing, the air you inhale passes unobstructed down your trachea. This sturdy tube is held open by rows of C-shaped bands of cartilage. The open end of each C faces the esophagus, allowing the esophagus to open during swallowing. Air flowing down the trachea passes over cilia, epithelial cells with tiny hairs that wave about 20 times per second. These sweep more particles out of the air and trap them in a layer of sticky mucus that coats the trachea's walls. Cigarette smoke can paralyze these cilia, allowing these damaging particles to enter the lungs. Particles are propelled back upward by the cilia until they reach the esophagus. Then they are swallowed and disposed of by the digestive system. Meanwhile, air that has been cleaned, warmed, and moistened continues down the trachea. Soon, the trachea divides into 2 smaller tubes, the bronchi. These tubes enter the lungs, then divide again and again until they are microscopic in size. Some of these are called bronchioles. Air travels along the bronchioles until they end in grape-like clusters of air sacs, the alveoli. These clusters make up the inner surface of your lungs. You have about 300 million alveoli in your lungs. Their combined surface area is about 70 square meters, some 600 square feet. Why such a large surface area? To gather enough oxygen from the air you breathe to supply the needs of all the trillions of cells in your body. Each air sac, or alveolus, is covered by a thin film of fluid and patrolled by white blood cells called phagocytes. These cells perform a final cleanup by engulfing most of the intruding matter that remains. This matter, along with the mucus that also traps dirt from the air, is passed back up the airways by the movement of cilia and eliminated from your respiratory system. Now, your respiratory system extracts oxygen from the air. First, oxygen dissolves into the fluid that covers each alveolus. Then it passes through the cells that form the walls of each alveolus. It continues through the thin walls of the capillaries that line the inside surface of the alveolus. This movement of oxygen is a process called diffusion. It occurs when the pressure or concentration of a gas on one side of a membrane is higher than on the other. Then the gas moves through the membrane until the pressure or concentration on each side is equal. Of course, if that gas were constantly removed, the pressure would never equalize and diffusion would continue. That's what happens in your lungs. Oxygen that passes through your alveoli into your capillaries is constantly being carried away by your blood, so diffusion never stops. Once oxygen enters the blood, nearly all of it is collected by the hemoglobin molecules within red blood cells. Hemoglobin is a complex iron-containing compound that turns bright red when it unites with oxygen. This gives blood its red color. Carried by hemoglobin in red blood cells, oxygen travels through a web of tiny capillaries. These merge into tiny veins called venules, which merge into larger venules and into veins that lead oxygenated blood toward your heart. Now your heart pumps the blood with its load of oxygen into arteries, which carry it to every part of your body. Arteries branch into smaller vessels called arterioles, which branch further, finally reaching capillaries so small in diameter that only one red blood cell can move through them at a time. In these capillaries, more diffusion takes place. This time, oxygen moves out of the blood, where its concentration is high. Oxygen diffuses through the capillary walls into the fluid surrounding the nearby cells, and then into the cells themselves. Cells need the oxygen for aerobic cellular respiration. In this process, nutrients release energy which is stored in a molecule called ATP. Oxygen receives electrons necessary for this process to occur. Your cells then use the stored energy to carry on their life functions. The final waste product of aerobic cellular respiration is carbon dioxide. Some diseases interfere with the flow of oxygen into your body. Emphysema, for example, breaks down the cells of the alveoli. Instead of many small chambers, it produces fewer large ones, severely impairing the efficiency of the lungs. People who suffer from emphysema have extreme shortness of breath and their activities are impaired. Most emphysema is caused by smoking. It is incurable and its results are irreversible. Bringing in oxygen is only half of the respiratory system's job. The other half is removing carbon dioxide, the principal waste product of aerobic cellular respiration. First, carbon dioxide diffuses out of your cells, through the walls of the capillaries, and into your bloodstream. About 20% of this carbon dioxide unites with hemoglobin and is carried by red blood cells. The other 80% is transported by the plasma, the watery portion of your blood. Circulating blood carries the carbon dioxide to your heart, which pumps the blood into your lungs. Here, blood flows into the capillaries that surround the air sacs, the alveoli that make up your lungs. Now, carbon dioxide leaves the blood, diffusing out through the walls of the capillaries and the alveoli. It spreads out in the air inside the alveoli. Then, passing into the 250,000 bronchioles, air with its load of carbon dioxide passes out along the bronchi and the trachea. You breathe it out, ridding your body of excess carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide has a profound effect on the rate and depth of your breathing. Brain cells in your medulla are highly sensitive to your blood's carbon dioxide content. When that level rises, the medulla sends impulses to your rib muscles and diaphragm. In response, you breathe faster and more deeply. This increases the rate at which carbon dioxide can be eliminated from the body. The amount of carbon dioxide in your blood also controls how fast your heart beats, and therefore how fast blood is pumped through your circulatory system. When the level of carbon dioxide decreases, the nerve impulses from the medulla slow down and you breathe more slowly. But sometimes this feedback fails to work correctly.
Hyperventilation is created when a person breathes too deeply or too rapidly. This can become very serious if it is not corrected. It can be caused by a person who is running, a person who's under emotional stress, or a person that has some sort of disease. Best thing to do is have the person sit down, relax, and breathe at a normal rate until you can obtain help.
So this is your respiratory system. Working together with your circulatory system, it fuels and then cleanses your body's cells by removing waste carbon dioxide and bringing in oxygen from the air. Oxygen that is carried to all your body's cells.